Okay. Oh, that was a bit loud. Hi. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to see you all here today. So when I tell people I'm going to Ignite to talk about phone number management within Skype for Business Server, they don't believe me that I can talk about it for 1 hour, let alone that there will be people here. So I will document that you're here. Everyone, raise your hands. Ignite! Great. Well, before we start, I need to show you something. I want to show you getsfvnumbers.ps1. I just released it on TechNet Gallery. And it's a new version of my old script that just found your next available phone number within Skype for Business. So this time around, I will generate a database containing data from the CDR database, from the monitoring server. I will check for disabled AD accounts. I will take into account ranges and reservations you want to exclude from your next available number as well. And it will go through and also mark numbers for in retention when they are activity on numbers, but they are not assigned to other users. And the output here, the summary, is you get the amount of available numbers, the amount of reserved numbers, as well as the name of the range and everything. But you also get the next available number and then next available extension based on all the information generated by this database. And actually, that was a video, and that script actually ran for 8 minutes. So the larger deployment you have, of course, it will run for a longer period of time. But I'm guessing this is not real-time information, right? You plan to add numbers to users, and that will they will not notice the time delay. So here you see that we have reserved numbers, gold numbers, silver numbers, disabled users in retentions, and numbers with activity. So there's a lot of good information here, and everything is PowerShell objects. So you can measure it, you can pick whatever information you'd like in order to work with this information. How cool is that? Yeah, but that's not all. I generate pie charts. How awesome is that? It goes straight to reporting. It generates an HTML file, and you can send that to your CXX and report on the utilization of your number ranges. It's easier to know when you need to order new numbers and see how many numbers that are in retention and also how many numbers are used in your deployment. So that is what we are going to go through today. So my goal for the presentation here is to help you pick a tool to move away from Excel. And the reason you don't want to use Excel is because it doesn't scale with time. So the Excel accuracy fades and becomes cumbersome to manage. It's awesome when you're onboarding users for the first time. You're just having all the users in a spreadsheet, just assigning numbers, and then you deploy that. But half a year down the road, a year down the road, it becomes outdated. And it becomes difficult to manage. And it doesn't take into account all the information that is in the Skype for Business server. And one more thing that is important is who is actually managing the Excel spreadsheet? Where is it stored? Do you know you have the latest version? And so on. And personally, I've seen that we have spent too much time administering and finding numbers in deployments, even when we started with Excel. And the reason for the Excel spreadsheet being outdated is because you have a dynamic user population. 20% of your users, they leave the company, they change roles. You hire new people, And you then need to have numbers in retention before you can assign it to a new user. So there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of what numbers you really want to assign to users. And then you need to take into account special numbers. Special numbers are typically nice-looking numbers with lots of zeros and sequential numbers. And you don't want to assign them automatically to anyone. You want to assign them to VIPs, response groups, call centers. So you need to know what numbers to reserve, what numbers to retain, and what numbers you really want to offer to new users. So I believe you can save time by using a more dynamic tool, which is through PowerShell or third-party tools. And so I'm going to go through how you can do this through PowerShell, but I'm also going to show some alternatives regarding how you can use third-party tools to do this as well. So I have 6 points to go through, not that many. So how to find all numbers in a deployment. Let's start with the basics. And then I want to talk how you can work with number ranges, and there's different ways to do that. I want to talk about retention and reservation and my thoughts around that, how we can build that database for reporting and analytics, what kind of options you have. And then I want to show you a practical example on how you can use this methodology in order to assign a new number to specific users. And then I want to walk through some third-party tools. Sounds interesting? Interesting? Yeah? Yeah. Yes! Yes, thanks. Okay, a bit about me. My name is Ståle Hansen. I work as a chief technical architect at Knowledge Factory in Norway. And I've been working with enterprise voice deployment since Office Communication Server 2007 R2. And in Norway, we had a special thing going on in the 2000s. We had companies moving away from PBXs and over to mobile-centric solutions. So we got to very early deploy enterprise voice for companies in a greenfield deployment. So we didn't have to compete with PBXs, which meant that we could enable all these users with enterprise voice and be an extension to the mobile phone and do more than a mobile phone, offering conferencing, offering better voice quality, and the awesome features that are available with OCS, Link, and now Skype for Business. So that's why I have spent a lot of time on phone number management. And back in 2010, I created this script, and I've been working with this throughout the years. I'm also a Skype for Business MVP, and that's because of my social media activity at Twitter. You can find me at Ståle Hansen. I'm part of the UC Architects podcast. Anyone heard about the UC Architects? Yeah. Yes. Awesome. It's a podcast where we get together to talk about Skype for Business, Link, and Exchange, and what's new, what's not working, and what's working. So I really recommend it if you're interested. And on a more personal note, since this is Star Wars Day, I need to confess that actually 15 years ago I did a Star Wars movie. So I want to show you a clip here. I'm the bad guy. And I'm really kicking the Jedi's ass right here. See that? How cool is that? Well, that's 15 years ago, so I'm a Star Wars fan. Okay, on a more serious note, how do we find all the numbers in a deployment and how can we work with them? Well, there are 9 entities in Skype for Business Server that can have a number. You have users, which can have 2 numbers, a line URI and a private line. Personally, I haven't seen much use of the private line. Anyone use private line a lot? Yeah, some of you? So private line is all about giving a number to a user that is not visible within the organization. But you can give it out to any external user and they can call you and it breaks through Do Not Disturb and so on. So you can give it to your spouse or you can give it to this VIP. But you have that option, and we need to document and capture that number as well. And then we have other services like common area phones, Exchange, unified messaging, dialing conferencing, trusted applications, response groups, meeting rooms, and analog devices. And I've been looking into Skype for Business server, and there aren't really more entities that can have a line URI in Skype for Business server either. Paul Valiant had a really good way to store this in a good object, a PowerShell object. So I used his function in order to gather all these numbers and work with them later within the script. So check out Paul Valiant's blog and look what he's doing. He's doing some good stuff around PowerShell and Skype for Business. I also want to talk about some best practices before we get started here, because the E164 format is the format that Skype for Business and Link is handling phone numbers. So every other format is something we need to normalize to E164. And this becomes more important now that we have more global deployments. Because if you don't include the country code, for instance, we don't know what country you're trying to dial. So you have global deployments with users in Europe, in the US, in Asia. And it's a good practice to include the full E164 format, even within Active Directory. And the thinking behind this is that when you're using Skype for Business, users aren't dialing numbers. They are dialing users. And even if you sync the phone number to your mobile phone, you will just click the user and dial the users there as well. So we don't type the number, we click the number and dial it. So having it in this format is preferable. And it also works well if you are abroad and just dial the user. It always works because it's with the plus sign. You have the country code, the local area code, and then the unique identifier. And it's an internationally recognized telephone number format, so it will always work. So, and it's quite visible within Skype for Business as well. If you go to a user and check his numbers, they will be there as users can click on. And even if you have users that's not enabled for Skype for Business, but do have a phone number in Active Directory, they will show up in your Skype for Business address book. So having the numbers in the correct format in Active Directory is really crucial. And then you have extensions. And extensions are part of the line URI that we use in typical in SIP-based telephony systems. And it is part of this format where you have tel colon and you have the E164 formatted number, and then you have the extension. And my recommendation here as well is to use extensions even though you don't use them for users, but users can use their extensions to authenticate. They can authenticate to the phone, Link Phone Edition, and also into conferences when they dial in externally and want to authenticate against the service as a leader of the conference. And my recommendation here as well is not to publish the extension that users can dial each other on. That's a bit old school, because now we're still clicking users, you remember, and calling them directly. And but extensions is preferable, and especially if you go into the dial-in page for users and you have you don't have the extension published, there will be an error message on that page, and that could generate first-line support calls, which we want to avoid. So that's why we would like to have extensions as well. Everything that is red doesn't work, it's broken, and they call you, right? Yeah. So that was short about numbers. Let's talk about number ranges. Number ranges is about getting a contiguous range of phone numbers from a telco. And my recommendation is to get more numbers than you have employees. And not just get a 10-digit range here and then wait for other people to join the deployment and order another 10 digits, but order a whole range for your entire company. And the reason for that is you have users that leave the company and you want to retain the number before you assign it to new users. And if you don't have enough numbers, you can't do that. And you also have numbers you want to reserve for special services. So working with ranges is important in terms of doing that. And it helps, it simplifies the solution if we have a large range to work with. Within my script, there are three ways to work with ranges. You can use unassigned numbers within Skype for Business. You can store them in an array in the script, or you can specify them as a custom range when you run the script. Unassigned number in Skype for Business is a range of numbers defined in your deployment. It's available through the control panel. And you can create an action for inbound calls calling the number in that range. You can inform that the number is not in use. You can redirect to voicemail. You can redirect to switchboard or just give a busy tone. Numbers assigned to users from that number range, of course, get higher priority. And the calls will be routed to the user or the response group or whatever. So the range is there to notify those calling the number that is not in use, it is not in use, and maybe you want to go to have that going to the switchboard. Here's how you do it in the Skype for Business server. This is for a UK range, where you need to create an announcement service in order to have the announcement going. And you need to create that announcement service per pool, and it needs to be created in advance before you create your unassigned number range. Based on unassigned numbers in Skype for Business, you run the script and it will check for the range that is defined. Here you see that you, by running the script with all ranges false and report grid false, you get a menu. And that menu is based on all the number ranges found within your deployment, either from unassigned numbers or from the array or from the input from when you're running the script. By pressing 1, it will go through the entire deployment and find all the users that have used a number within the range and give you a good report. So just by specifying unassigned numbers, you will get some good info back. You can also store a range within an array, because I also heard companies that don't want to use unassigned numbers. They don't want to have an action taken on numbers that is not in use within the organization. They don't want it to take slots on their zip trunk. So that's why I also given the option to specify a range within the script. You just specify a name and a start and an end. Preferably in the E164 format. So this time around we do France, and we run the script again, and we get a new menu with both from the unassigned numbers and also the one specified in the array. And we choose France, and it will give you feedback on the French number range. You can also run the script with a range start, a range end, and a name. This time it's Italy. And that's more for ad hoc scenarios, or if you want to test a subset of number ranges within your larger number ranges. And since you specify the name, it won't give you the menu. So it just runs through and gives you the information you would want. So here we see the information you get, and you see that the total numbers in range are 6, and the numbers available are 4. So there are 2 users that have a number, and you also see that the first available number here is not the first number in the range, but the third number. So yeah, it's good information. There's actually a fourth option, and some providers give you access to a REST API. And from there you can get a number range from the provider instantly instead of you organizing the number ranges. And Paul Valiant has an example where you can use the REST API to get that number range. And as soon as we have a name and a start and an end, we can work with that within our deployment. So, about retention and reservations. Retention of a number is when you have a grace period between users. So you have a user leaving your company, and you don't want to assign that same number to new users right away. You want to wait 30 days, you want to wait 60 days, or whatever. And you can also use disabled ID accounts in order to retain numbers, because as long as the user is disabled in Active Directory but still enabled for Skype for Business, the number will still be attached to that user. So if your routine is to delete ID accounts 30 days down the road or half a year or whatever, you can use that as kind of a retention as well. But there is more useful information we can use in order to retain numbers. We can check for logon activity. So we can use logon activity in order to suggest when to disable an ID account. And logon activity we get from the CDR database within Skype for Business. So that's quite accurate information, and sometimes more accurate than Active Directory, because logon information in Active Directory follows the domain controller the user logged onto. So in Skype for Business, there's a table where you actually find the last logon time and some conferencing info as well. So we can use that in order to connect it with Active Directory users that are disabled, but we can check for if they haven't logged on for 60 days, then we can wipe the user and so on, or just release the number. But we can also check on activity on the number, and that is also information that is present within the CDR database. So we can check that if it's an inbound call to that number made within the past 30 days or 60 days or whatever, then we want to retain the number if there actually is activity on the number, either if it's from a retained number or a number that is not assigned but there is activity there. And if you have enough numbers within your range, you can exclude those numbers in the first available number provided for the range. And that helps you to not assign a number that someone is calling. And because that is also something you need to troubleshoot. Why do I get calls that is not intended for me? And we can use that information in order to retain numbers. And this is typically difficult to manage through Excel spreadsheets. So let's look how this works. In terms of finding the disabled Active Directory accounts, I use a PowerShell one-liner I found at MVP Pat Richards' blog, where we check the CSAD user and see if that account is disabled. And then we check if the account is enabled for link, but is disabled in Active Directory, and we get those users and the numbers they have. So here's an example where we disable a couple of users in Active Directory, and then we run this one-liner in order to find the same users. Then that gives us some information, but combining that with the logon activity, we really can say something about when we want to release that number. So here is a grid view output of the deployment, where we have connected to the CDR database, and we have different scenarios here. We have numbers that are in use on enabled users, but we see that they have not logged on for 162 days, which means that maybe they don't need a line URI. Maybe we can release that line URI because no one is calling them. And we can give them a dummy number and show a switchboard number or the primary number on the trunk instead of locking down a line URI for those users. And here we also see that we have disabled users, which is defined in the retention type. And we see that we have disabled users here that has not logged on for 103 days. So maybe it's time to release that number. Agreed? So here's the SQL query. We get this information from the user statistics database or table, and we connect it through the user ID, the users and the user ID table, in order to get the name of the users, because those are not present in the user statistics table. And this was inspired by GetLink orphaned users created by Guy Bakar and Yoav Barslav. And it's an awesome way to find logon time for users, and it's quite accurate. If the number is available, or not assigned to a user, but there's still activity on the number, we can also use the CDR database in order to find activity. And because everything is stored within the CDR database, so we can find how many times someone has called that number, even though there are no users attached to it. So here we have numbers that are in retention because there is activity on them for the last 30 days. And these numbers won't get offered in the next available number for the number range. And that is also quite useful information. And we see also there is, on the retention type here, we see that some of these numbers are also reserved since there are diamond, silver, and bronze numbers. So we maybe don't want to assign those either, or we may want to have someone answer those calls because these are good numbers, and it may be good for the company in order to answer calls to those primary numbers. And we see also there are some users that have quite low activity. The last 30 days, they got 2 calls. So you can use this information in order to maybe release the number or look at the user why they don't use enterprise voice that much. So there's a lot of useful information here you can use in order to release numbers, retain numbers, and follow up on users of why they are not using enterprise voice. In order to get the number activity, I found a lot of good information in the VoIP details table. And connecting that with the phone ID and under the phones table, I found the activity and the number it was activity on. And then I counted all the times a number showed up during a time period, and that is the base of that number. We also look at where connected number ID is not 0 and to gateway ID is not 0. Which means that it's an external PSTN call. So last logon information and number activities picked up from the CDR database, and I'm sure there's a lot more cool information in there as well we can use in order to put into this database we are building. If you want to export this information to Excel, of course you can do that. You can get SFB numbers, all ranges to true, and then report grid to false and report CSV to true. It will store under C colon and reports folder. You also can output to grid view, of course, where you do all ranges and report grid. So there is different ways here you can consume the information provided. Regarding reservation of numbers, there is a philosophy out there that there are some numbers that fit a description of a gold number, a silver number, special number, and you also may want to reserve numbers that you should exclude from the solution. Because these are kind of numbers you want to manually assign to VIPs, to switchboards, to call centers, or other services. And so these will not be offered as the next available number, and you will use that information in order to manually assign them, and they can pick from a list and everything. You can offer that as a premier service, right? Yeah. And you can also find some specific special numbers that are reserved for future services, branches, and locations. And you can look at shorter number series within a larger number series. So a typical gold number is have a format like double, triple, double, double, zero, ending with that. Here's an example, 11, 22, 0. Or 5 digits in a row, or 4 digits in a row. And triple digits and ending with a 0, or they are sequential. And these are kind of numbers that you want to offer to special services and VIPs. And then you have silver numbers, which are maybe double with ending with 0, 007 maybe. Actually, last week I had 3 different cases from 3 different customers that wanted to reserve 007. They really wanted a 007 number. So these are, of course, individual settings. You can find, go through your range manually in order to find the gold and silver and bronze numbers you want to reserve. Bronze numbers are typically nicer numbers, ending with a 0 maybe. And yeah, you can define them yourself, but here are some suggestions. You also have special numbers, numbers that do not have any equals or not in a sequential range, but that have other significant values within your country, within your location, or for your company, that you may want to reserve them. If it forms a word you like, or when you're dialing, you dial 123 bus, or something like that. That's the kind of numbers you want to reserve as well. And there is also some numbers you want to exclude. And numbers containing 666, for instance. But there are big cultural differences here. Because 666 is not a well-received number in Western Europe or maybe in North America. But in China, they really like 6 because it brings luck. So you need to, there is some cultural differences here. And also in China, 4 is bad luck. And in some countries, 13 is bad luck. So you need to look at the different cultures, maybe sync up with some local knowledge regarding phone numbers in order to reserve specific numbers within those specific ranges. And these numbers will never get offered, but you can, of course, assign them manually to some users you don't like. And yeah. And this is also to reduce calls to first-line support, because if you actually give out such a number, they will call in order to change the number, and you have all this process going on in order to change it. So save time by excluding them. So reservation of numbers. Here we see that, I think this was the UK range, where we actually have a gold number as the first available number. And we want to reserve that as a gold number. And here's an example of how you do it within the script. So at the top of the script, you can reserve as many gold, silver, bronze, special, and excluded numbers as you want. And you can also use unassigned numbers to do this. My recommendation here is actually to use unassigned numbers for gold numbers and other important numbers, because you can redirect them to the switchboard and find out why people are calling that number, or redirect it to a response group, or just notify that this number is owned by us, but it's not in use yet, or something like that. because these are good numbers that you want the public to know about and maybe become part of a future service. So the format you want to specify in unused numbers are, in this case, bronze and then underscore. As long as it is in that format, the script will pick it up and tag it as a bronze reserved number. So running the script, selecting UK, you see now we have two numbers in retention. We have a gold number and a bronze number. And the first available number now is 06, or 5506. So, that's easy to reserve number within the script or through unassigned numbers. Had one customer that wanted all the reserved numbers in unassigned number because they want to have some action taken. They want to notify that these numbers are not in use, but they're still owned by us as a company. So you see here that you have one bronze, one gold, and two numbers in retention. You may also want to reserve smaller ranges within your larger number range. And that is typically for, here we have a new range for Cincinnati, and we want to reserve the end of the range for future response group services. So then we create a range with res and underscore, and that will flag the range as a range within the range and will not have double features or the number two times within the database. And it will be handled as a separate range, and all those 10 numbers will be removed from the total count from the main range. So you don't have to, even though you want to split your range, you don't have to split it. You just specify the specific ranges you want to have within your solution. So here we also use unassigned numbers to do that. Here we are reserving numbers for call centers, which is the 10 first numbers within that range. And we use the same start. We're using res and underscore in order to be able to flag it as a reserved range. So when running the script, we see that the total numbers available are 80 and not 100 for the main range, the Cincinnati range. And we see that there are also two numbers used within that range. And if you look at running the script for future call center, we see that it is handled as a separate range. So you can report on it, you can follow it, and work with it as a typical range, even though it's a range within a range. So it starts with the first digit, which is the first digit in the larger range, but it will be handled as a separate range. And if you look into the grid view, you can see that the future RGS is now handled as a separate range, and Cincinnati, Ohio range is having the amount of numbers and the settings that we see here. So I had a customer that wanted to split a range of 4,000 numbers in 15. That would not be easy to handle if you didn't have this range within a range. It's more easier to handle. And then let's look at the database and how we can report on it and how we can do analytics around it. There are two types of reporting data. You have summary, and then you have all info. And summary, you just run the script, and then you get the summary outputted to the PowerShell window, which is what we see here. We see the start, the end, the numbers available, the numbers in use, the numbers in retained, and so on. And you see that it starts with, for the entire range, for 4,000 numbers, but we did reserve a lot of ranges within the range. So the actual available numbers are 3,500. And we see that there is a lot of numbers that is actually available, and the numbers that are in retention is, in this case, 528. We also see that there are disabled users in retention, and we also see that there are 41 numbers that is not assigned to a user, but still get activity. So this breaks down why we reserve number, why we retain numbers, and we can make sure that the number offered as the next available or first available number is the correct number. So these numbers, gold numbers, silver numbers, and so on, you want to manually assign. And then you, of course, can run get SFB numbers, report pie chart to HTML, and where you generate pie chart for each series and range. And it will generate for the main range as well as all those reserved ranges as well. And it gives you information on number of available numbers, and number of used numbers, and also the amount of numbers in retention. And this is a good way to report in terms of making sure you have enough numbers when you are onboarding a larger amount of users, or you need to order new numbers for future call services or whatever. And since it's a pie chart, it's a really good way to report upwards. Just put it in a PowerPoint, and you can have decision made based on that information. How cool is that? Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Right now, I don't email this report, but that's easily fixed in a future release. And then you have all info. If you want to export all this info that we have seen in grid view and what the summary is based on, you can get this by running the script, get SFB numbers, return all info true, and then store that in a variable, and then you can do whatever you would like to do for the script and create your own routines in order to do reporting, in order to find specific, maybe those disabled users that don't have a, not logged on for 30 days or 60 days or whatever, and then disable them. So this helps you work with all this information that is provided. So a practical approach. Let's see how we can use this. So in this case, I want to specify UK and get the first available number as a line URI. I don't just want to have the number itself. I want the complete line URI for UK. So we run that commandlet, and it will return the completely formatted line URI. You can just put in your enable user or set user and with enterprise voice enabled and specify the line URI. And we can see how we can use that in an example as well. In this case, we have 4 users that is not enabled for enterprise voice. They're not enabled for a line URI. And here you see we are running the script for those users using the commandlet I showed you previously. And here you see that 3 of those users have gotten a new number, been enabled for enterprise voice with a line URI, correctly formatted with an extension and everything. And note that if the extension is used by another range or it is used by another user within the organization, we will skip that number entirely and offer a brand new number with an extension that is not in use. So we don't get overlapping extensions either. But we see there is a user here that didn't get a number because it didn't have enough numbers. So that is back to reporting and seeing that you have enough numbers before you enable all those users. So paying attention to how many numbers you have within your range is important. So back to this. Use the pie chart. That's the main takeaway from today, by the way. You can find the script, examples, and other enterprise voice tools at sfvnumbers.net. I just posted the script and also referenced where I found the examples as well. And in the future, I will bring out more examples and how you can use the script within your deployment. The script is at the moment in beta, because I just tested it in a few deployments, but I have tested it in production. It works with Lync Server 2010, 2013, and Skype for Business Server 2015, because there's not much difference between those. So yeah, go and download it and play with it and see how you can do more with number ranges. Let's look at some third-party alternatives. Because one thing is doing this yourself in PowerShell, but that means you need to work with PowerShell and have users that is comfortable working with PowerShell. And of course, they should be comfortable working with PowerShell, but if you have maybe a reporting services, or you have a coexistent environment with Cisco, Avaya, Unity, and so on, you may want to use some other tools as well. So I want to highlight Event Zero and Unimax to show you what they are doing with number ranges. Event Zero has this complete analytics solution, so they don't do just number administration. It's cloud-based, or you can implement it on premises as well. And the cloud-based approach is quite easy to get started with. You just get registered at their site and download some connectors, and you're good to go. And it contains Range Manager in order to report on ranges. So here you see what it looks like. If you go to Overview, you will see a good summary of the ranges you have within your deployment. And you also get a pie chart. So they have done it right. And within that pie chart, they will actually check for activity on numbers as well. In this case, we didn't have any numbers that wasn't assigned that there were activity on. But that will also be bubbled up for you in the summary report. So if you go and look at the specific ranges, you can, of course, get all the numbers within your deployments, including the ranges, or you can drill down into specific ranges. You get a summary there as well, and as well as utilization of your number range. And if you go and click on one of them, you of course get a pie chart of utilization. You get a summary of number of available numbers and what the start range is. And you also get a table where you see all numbers used and what users are assigned to those numbers and what numbers are available. And you can export that into a Excel spreadsheet and work with this information. So this is quite accessible information provided by a third-party tool, and this is part of a larger analytics solution as well. And then we have Unimax with their Second Nature software. The thing here is that they support not just Microsoft, but Cisco, Avaya, Alcatel, Unity, and they've been around for 25, 30 years. So they've been working with these PBX vendors for a long time. And now also those Lync and Skype for Business. They do range management across platforms. So if you have a coexistent environment with Cisco PBXs and Avaya and so on, you can define a number range, and you can lock it in for Skype for Business for some users, Cisco for some users, and Avaya for some users. And it's better reporting across platforms. You can even enable, assign, and migrate users across these platforms. So you can actually work with users from a single interface across those platforms. And they also have some complementing software like Spotlight. Spotlight generates pie charts, so you probably should get that. And Number Pro, which is a web interface where you can get the next available number and you can hand that out to your first-line support and so on. So let's look at what that looks like. Here you see within the deployment, you can find all the different systems defined. So here you have some Cisco, you have some Avaya, and you have Link. You also get a lot of Link information. You can work with policies. You can work with all the settings that is available through PowerShell as well. And if you open the number ranges, you see that these number ranges are not bound to any platform, but they are cross-platform. So just define number ranges per site, per city, per country, and have the Second Nature software manage the number range across platforms. Here you can see that we have users enabled for enterprise voice in Link. And you see what kind of users have been enabled, if it's a response group, if it's a dialing conferencing, or if it's a typical end user. So here you also see the utilization of any given number series and how many numbers are available, not just for Link, but for entire platform. And you also have some threshold value where you can get notified if there are less than 10 numbers available within your deployment to make sure that you are aware that you don't have that many numbers left. Here's an important feature I want to show you. You can search for who owns a specific number. So you search for this number, and it will search these different platforms and show you where the number is available and where it's used. So in this case, we have a user that have the number in Link and also have the same number assigned in Avaya. So it will help you make sure that either it is used too many times, or you have what kind of platform the user is connected to and getting its zip trunk from. So here, in this example, we enable a user for Link, and we can do everything from Active Directory to Link to the Cisco part of the deployment directly from a single interface. You can define templates. In this template, we want to enable the user for enterprise voice, and we also want to give a unified messaging extension to that user. So you can enable templates for first-line support users that needs to enable specific users and give them the correct settings when enabling them. Here you can choose what kind of number should be assigned to the user, and the list is generated cross-platform, of course, in terms of what numbers are available to assign to that user, also based on the range you defined, and so on. And also, in this case, we write that number back to Active Directory, so the correct E164 formatted number is also present under the phones attribute in Active Directory. And you can see here that we can choose what kind of policy the user should get and manage this from this single interface. So the advantage here is typically if you don't have Link people or Skype for Business people managing this kind of solution, you can outsource this to the guys that already manage phone numbers in Cisco or other places, but still make sure that they do it right. So my goal today was to help you pick a tool to move away from Excel. And hopefully you've seen something you can use or build upon. And my recommendation is to use a dynamic tool like PowerShell or third-party tools. And I really believe you can save time. I've seen customers using 30 minutes to 2 hours just finding the correct number and assigning it to a user. And even then it could be wrong because it could be a number that they were activity on, so they need to troubleshoot it, and you can spend days and ages on just troubleshooting that phone number. And we should save time on that and avoid it. So I can open the floor for questions or comments. If you have a question, please step up to the microphone and ask your question, and we take it from there. So no questions? Well then, thank you. If you're interested in enterprise voice, we have a couple of sessions on that at Ignite. You have the voice of Skype for Business. You have the Skype for Business work scenario called via work. And you also have the enterprise voice and expert session, which I really recommend that you go to. So please evaluate the session and all other sessions at Ignite. And thank you.